managing corporate compliance, executing corporate transactions, human resource management, procurement, and managing key stakeholder engagements. Adjoba Kyiamah, sorry, am I getting the name right?
Yeah, Adjoba Kyiamah, yeah.
Kyiamah, okay, is currently the Executive Director of the UK-Ghana Chamber of Commerce, Ghana UK Chamber of Commerce. She was previously a Senior Associate of Ceci Legal, legal consultants, arbitrators, and notaries public. Prior to that, until the end of December 2017, she was the Legal and Corporate Affairs Director of Accra Bureau Limited, the Ghana subsidiary of Abimbe,
Yeah.
the world's largest beer company. All right, so Adjoba holds a bachelor's degree in geography with English from the University of Ghana, Legon, a master's degree in urban planning and development from the University of Manchester, UK, and a qualifying certificate of law from the Ghana Law School. Thanks. Yeah, Doc, please, that's about it. Very rich.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. All right, guys, so that is our guest lecturer, Adjoba Kyiamah. Please welcome her.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, so Adjoba, please, that's the advocacy class. It's we call it international business, advocacy class. It's actually advocacy government relations. So we have a class of nearly 50, and today we are hosting you. We are very proud to host you today. So that's the class. So
thank you very much, Kobe.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I have developed a philosophy since the COVID-19 pandemic that I don't work over the weekend. You can tell that this matters a lot to me, for me to actually sit at my computer on a Sunday morning, because I've been working from home since March of this year, even before the government announced the partial lockdown. And you know what happens when you work from home? The lines become blurred. And so March into May, I was practically working every day, late into the night, because it's like, oh, I have things to do, I'm not done, and really, you're not going to go and sit in your car and go and sit in traffic. So I realized that if I wasn't careful, all I'll be doing is work. So my policy these days is that no work at the weekend. But having said that, I'm actually very excited about this opportunity. Kobe and I have been talking about it for the past 3 years, because I think the last time I did this was like about 4 years ago. 2 years ago, I started a program with the Ghana School of Law as well, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to continue it. So my understanding of this class is that we are going to be talking about advocacy. And advocacy is something that I think I've been doing even before I went to law school, without even realizing that I was doing it, because all lawyers are advocates, and so it's sort of second nature to everything that I've done in my career, even though I didn't realize it beforehand. I would like this class to be very interactive. I don't want to be doing all the talking, so I would appreciate it if anybody has a question. You can either send it through the chat window by instant message. If you have a contribution, if there's something that I talk about that you actually have a real life example from your own experience that you would like to share, you can post it in the chat box, or please raise your hand and I will call you. It's unfortunate that I can't see everybody's faces. However, I suppose this is the new way of engaging, so we have to get used to it. And I also understand that people have data challenges, so it's better for their videos to be off. Given that I don't know what the class has discussed previously, it may very well be that I might be repeating things that you already know, but please bear with me and indulge me. So if any of you knows what people do in corporate affairs, you would know that what corporate affairs does, or external relations, as some companies will call it, is that you do stakeholder engagement or stakeholder management. And was it Linda? I think it was Linda that did the introduction.
Yes.
Of me, yeah. So what Linda spoke about, you would realize that most of my career, even though it's been in different sectors of the economy, most of it has been stakeholder engagement. And how would we define a stakeholder? Anybody that a company engages with. So it could be a group, it could be an individual, and these individuals or these groups could be customers or clients of the business. They could be employees. So sometimes people forget that employees are key stakeholders. And so you have to engage with them internally. Suppliers, your creditors, your debtors, shareholders of the business, the board, you know, the community around the business, or the community in which the business's footprint covers. So it could be the whole country, it could be the whole world, or it could be just the physical vicinity around the business. And there's also government. And then finally, the general public, because whether you like it or not, there's a public interface. So the entire general public may not be your customer, they may not be your supplier, but whether you like it or not, you're part of a nation. And so you have to interact with the general public. I believe that my focus today is supposed to be on government relations and my experience with engaging with governments, and some of my successes. I will talk about my failures as well, because it was not all perfect. So, you know, the first thing you have to do really is you must have a plan. And you must map your stakeholders. So even in government, you must map out who your stakeholders in government are, because not everybody in government would be necessarily your stakeholder. And my experience, when many years ago, I used to work for the multimedia group, and I worked in corporate resources. So essentially, I was like a glorified housekeeper. And I kept house. I made sure that the work environment was conducive, or I tried. I handled HR for a while until I hired an HR manager. I used to do general services. I was the representative of the company and the Ghana Independent Broadcasters Association. And I also handled engagement with the National Communications Authority and the Media Commission. And
flash it.
Okay. Kobe, I think you need to put people on mute.
Yeah.
So what it is in that particular instance, when you're mapping out your stakeholders, you're going to be looking at all these key groups, you know, and then you determine what you either require from those groups or individuals, and what they also require from you. So if we use the National Communications Authority as an example, you have to ensure that your license requirements are all in order. You know, your broadcast licenses are all in order, you've paid for it, you know, and you're complying with all the rules and regulations that it comes with, you know, and you build a relationship with the key officials, so like the Director General and the Technical Director and people like that. And one of the fundamental rules that anybody that has to work in a stakeholder engagement position knows is that you build relationships, you make friends before you actually need them, because people don't like to feel used. Can you imagine if every time Kobe would call me, it's because he's looking for something from me? I probably would stop answering his calls,
Yeah.
But yeah, the first time we met, I had no idea who he was. He had no idea who I was. I think we sat next to each other at some event or something.
That's right, yes.
We struck a conversation.
Advertising Ghana event.
Yes, and we struck up a conversation, and he was very interesting to chat with, and I like interesting people to chat with, And then later on, I found out that he was a lecturer in marketing, and I was like, okay. At the time, what was I looking for? Somebody to chair our
marketing and sales
compliance committee. And I needed an independent person who had no connection with the business, who would be very independent and not come with a certain bias or whatever, and be open-minded about assessing our marketing communications and make sure that they were compliant with company policy and also with the laws of Ghana. And so I started asking around, and the name that kept coming up was Dr. Kobe Mensah. And I was like, oh yeah, the gentleman that I met, And then I reached out. But can you imagine if we had never met before and we'd never engaged with each other, he probably would have been less receptive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's how the friendship started. Anyway, so like I said, it's always important to make friends before you need them. So when you take a job, you notice in the media all the time when people are appointed to positions, they start making courtesy calls on all the key parties that they must engage with. You reach out, you introduce yourself so that they know who you are, you know who they are. And sometimes friendships that continue for a lifetime are built. I have friends that I made through work, and they become more like family today, And so you have to know, as I was talking about stakeholder mapping, you have to know who you need to ensure that your work is done. And once you've done that, you assess the impact that if you do not build a relationship with them and you're not in good standing, the impact that will have on your business. And that's where risk assessment comes in. So what's the likelihood of something terrible happening, and what would be the impact of that in your business? You assess all of that. And you look at the ones that are really, really high and where the impact would be major, and you work on a plan to ensure that that disaster does not befall your business. When it comes to government, why do we have to build a relationship with government? Because one would ask, well, you're in private business and government is a public business, It's very important because, when government makes policies or legislation is introduced, that affects your business. It could affect it either positively or negatively, and you don't want to be sitting there and be surprised. One day you wake up and the VAT rate has gone up, and you are in the business of selling fast-moving consumer goods or producing and selling fast-moving consumer goods, and VAT rate has gone up. Guess what will happen to your business? Your volumes will drop and people will stop buying, and if you're in formal business, what happens is that you have to necessarily comply because you're a law-abiding business. And what will happen is that the people that are smuggling the same products that you're selling will have a field day because they're not paying the right duties, they're bringing it in illegally, and so they can price you out of the market. And so you don't want such a surprise to before your business. And that's why you must be friends with tax policy at the Ministry of Finance to ensure that you know what they are plotting and you can have a seat at the table and have a conversation with them about, the impact of such a decision. And you have to understand your business very well. You have to know the socioeconomic footprint of your business. So as part of your stakeholder mapping, you have to do an assessment of that. How many people do you employ, right? Even if you have 20 employees, those employees would have families that they feed from the salary that they earn from your business. Your suppliers also have families that they feed from the money they earn from supplying to your business. Government earns taxes from your business because you will be paying payee for your employees. You will be returning VAT from the goods that you're selling. You will be paying income tax when you earn revenue. You will be paying other taxes also depending upon what business you're in. So in the beverage alcohol business, there's excise on beverages. Even if it's a non-alcoholic and it's even water, there's excise. So you'll be returning excise to government, and that's a lot of taxes. And the taxes that government uses to develop the country. So if your business ceases to exist, can you imagine what the fallout would be, even if it's not a big business? And you just, like I said, in our hypothetical example, that you have 20 employees. Those 20 employees have to go home, and their families will not be fed, their children's school fees will not be paid, your suppliers will no longer have markets for their goods and services. Government will lose out on the tax revenue that you return to them. And so it's not just about you, if you're one individual that owns that business, it's not just about you and your family. The impact is quite severe. So can you imagine if you employ 1,000 people? The magnitude of the loss of that business will be even bigger. And so when you're engaging with government and you're telling them why your business is important, that's why you need to know what your footprint is and why they must take you seriously. And so you will find out that, yes.
But just a question. There was, I think last semester, in one of my advocacy class, CSR class, there was this argument, by some of the scholars in CSR that taxation and corporate responsibility to taxes is actually a CSR. And and I asked, that's a debate in the CSR literature as we speak.
Yes, it is. I know.
From the points that you've raised, fantastically fits into that narrative. Obviously, I let the student go out to speak to corporate Ghana. And surprised, the majority of them don't actually see that these responsibilities are actually CSR, especially when you are very prim and proper towards your tax obligations and towards the obligations that you actually highlighted. And so corporate Ghana is very weak in their negotiation with the government, because they think that CSR alone is about they building houses, building schools, etc.
No.
So that's
Kobe, it's a good thing that you drew my attention to this. And it's something that I always use the opportunity to speak to groups to raise that, the mere fact that even the business exists, it's a huge deal. I think it's something that we don't take cognizance of.
That's right.
When a business does charity work, that's extra. It's actually extra. So if a business cannot afford to do charity work, you shouldn't penalize that business. You shouldn't think that they don't do enough, because not everybody can be an MTN. Not everybody can be a Vodafone, because they don't make that kind of revenue to ensure that their margins are so huge that they have excess to be able to go and do that charity work and build schools and build hospitals, and do things that cost a lot of money. Not everybody can afford that. And I remember that back in the day when Akabiri was an SAB Mela subsidiary, I used to participate in or submit the company to reputation surveys, because I found that it was an excellent way to measure my work.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've argued with several MDs in succession was that they always thought that corporate affairs was not wide in scope, that is not important. You know, everybody thinks that people who work in the commercial function are the most critical people in the business, because if the business doesn't sell, the business doesn't make money. And I actually had to make a case for the fact that, yes, HR and corporate affairs may be soft functions and may look like they're very small in scope.
Cost centers. Mm-hmm.
However, you know what we do is more subtle. It's indirect, you know, so it's not as direct as marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So we are not in your face, but we still influence buying decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we still influence how people perceive the business.
Excellent.
And so participating in reputation surveys, what then happened is that management then began to set up, you know, to see that, hey, indeed, the work that these people are doing is very important. And I'm proud to say that in successive reputation surveys that were conducted, our scores kept going up, and we tried to benchmark with reputable businesses. So like Nestle Ghana, Unilever, you know, and then our competitors, naturally, Guinness Ghana Breweries Limited and things like that. And we wanted to see how people perceived us, you know, in comparison to these other people. And what then happened was that we were always getting feedback, you need to do more, you need to be building schools, you need to be building hospitals and stuff like that. So the public did not see CSR or CSI, as we used to call it, corporate social investment, as our strongest suit, because as far as they were concerned, we were not building schools, we were not building hospitals, we were not doing large-scale investment in things like that, because they were comparing us to the MTNs of this world. But you know, obviously, I wasn't there to now go and tell them that go and look at their revenues and look at our revenues. It's not comparable. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, abracadabra, before you come in, does it mean that we probably corporate Ghana in totality perhaps needs a bit of a PR campaign, because they are paying a lot to government. Government, obviously, in most cases, and I'm not afraid to say politicians misuse the money.
Yeah.
And as a result, corporate Ghana now have to go and build schools, which the taxes and all those things that you've mentioned are supposed to be used for by government. So it means that corporate Ghana now has to go out there to perhaps build the gap that has been left, that you're only seen as a corporate citizen only when you build schools. But what about the employment that you're actually providing to keep a government in power? Because if you do not provide that essential employment, there will be unemployment, and the end result is that the government will be kicked out. So I suppose maybe corporate Ghana in totality has to start doing some kind of a public relation activity for people to understand the synthesis of the various things, taxes, employment, you know, other things that they're actually giving for the society to actually be in a very good shape. So perhaps that's what maybe.
Yes, so I agree with you. I mean, and it's a good thing you're doing with your class, because advocacy is very, very important. What people fail to realize is that how you tell your story is very important, you know, and like Kobe is saying, if you don't tell your story to define what impact you're making and what contribution you're making, nobody is going to listen to you. And one of the things that I still work on today is advocacy around corruption and how it affects the private sector. So I'm sure you're all aware that, or if you're not, it's good to know that with multinationals, they have really, really airtight compliance policies, you know, and it's about business ethics, you know, and how you do business, and not paying bribes. And even when AB InBev took over Carberry, what then happened was that they even had a gift policy where you were not allowed to give gifts at all. Whereas their predecessors had a gift policy that said you could give gifts to the total value of $100 in a year, you know, without actually seeking permission for it. If you wanted to give a gift of more of a higher value beyond $100 US, what you have to do was seek permission and make a case for it. You know, so of course, a case of beer is not that expensive. It's not $100 US. So you could actually say, oh, I'm dealing with this person at okay, hypothetically, I'm trying to renew our lease at a land commission, and of course, because we are not allowed to give gifts and pay bribes and stuff like that, you don't do any of that. It takes a while, but you get it done. And then one of the people that you interacted with at land commission says that, oh, I've lost my mother and the funeral is next week. And you're like, oh, shedding why? And then you go to the funeral and the work has been done, right? It's been done. It's not like you're trying to influence them to do anything for you. And you are like, oh, okay, we produce beer. So here's a couple of cases of beer to help you with the funeral as my funeral contribution. You know, that used to be allowed. You know, it wasn't a bribe to influence anybody, but it was more like a thank you, you know, and as part of our culture in Ghana, we do that. It's a member, you go to a funeral and you give a donation. There's nothing wrong with that. That used to be allowed. These days, a lot of multinationals don't allow that at all, because their position is that this is a government official that you may have interacted with in the past or you may interact with at some point in the future. So they don't want to create any ambiguous situation where somebody would think that you've tried to influence the person for future gain. And when that happens, how do you ensure that you still maintain good relations and you deliver on the outcomes that you desire? And that is where how you tell your story becomes important. So I have a good example of some work that we did around excise when I was at Akaburi. The current exercise.
Maybe before we get there, let's finish. Then I'll call Abracadabra. His hands is up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to give this example in the context of what you talk about.
Okay.
So the current excise regime is such that there's a rate for beverage products generally, right? And the standard, I think for beer, it's 47.5%. And so for every bottle of beer that you buy, the excise rate in that price is, I think, 47.5%, which goes to government, right? And so we actually negotiated. Now, okay, I don't want anybody to quote me on that because I can't really remember, but somebody can check whilst we are speaking and confirm whether it's 47.5%. Because that's what makes beer quite expensive compared to a lot of other countries. And so we had a conversation with government and we said, you know what, beer is so expensive that poor people can't afford to buy beer. And people drink alcohol. So you should actually be worried about the sort of alcohol that people are buying because they can't afford to buy formal alcohol. Formal alcohol is produced in an environment that's hygienic and you know that it's safe to consume and it's only 5% ABV, so it's not harmful to the person, you know, unless you abuse it and you drink copious amounts and make yourself sick. On the contrary, people are drinking all sorts of things because it's cheaper, it's homemade, or it's made in somebody's backyard. And you don't know whether the conditions which... No, excise, somebody Kobe.
Yeah.
It can't, it's not 16%, though. It can't be 16%.
Is a Ghana excise tax on beer is estimated at 16% on the average retail price. Unless this document is wrong.
No, so I will...
I'll check for you. So
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's got different rates. So it goes to the story. There's different rates. So we said, you know what, you don't know about the hygiene. People are dying from kidney failure, liver disease, and things like that because they are drinking all sorts of herbal concoctions that's not regulated, and because it's affordable, you know. And so why don't we strike a deal and we can use local raw materials? Because, you know, traditionally beer is made from barley and hops, which we don't grow in Ghana and we don't have. So we have to necessarily import it. And we are like, traditional beer or home brews, you know, like pito, are made from grains that are grown locally. So what if we made a beer and we used locally grown grain? if we made a beer from maize or sorghum or millet or something, how would you classify it, and how would you tax it? Because if you tax it at the same rate as you would a beer that's made from imported barley and hops, it will still be too expensive. And it's not like it's cheaper to use local raw materials, you know, because agri here is not that highly commercialized to make the produce that much cheaper. So it's going to cost us about the same amount of money to use local raw materials as it would cost us to bring in imported barley, because we are part of a multinational and they have economies of scale. So their buying power is so huge that we import those raw materials at a low rate, you know, and therefore we would only use local raw materials if you can reduce the rate of excise on the beer made from local raw materials. So in the first instance, I think that was towards the dying years of President Kufuor's term is when we started having that conversation. And I remember that we had meetings with the Vice President then, Ali Mahama of blessed memory. And so it was like, how would you classify a beer that's solely made from local raw materials? And they're like, okay, this is not something that at that time it was called Revenue Agencies Governing Board. And you don't want the CEO to just sit in his office and then determine for you, you know, or the Minister of Finance will just tell you that it's zero rated, or I'm going to, of my own volition, reduce the excise for you because necessarily it has to go to Parliament. So a working group was set up, and we had a representative from Tax Policy Unit at the Ministry of Finance. We had a representative from Ministry of Agri, and then we had a representative from Accra Brewery, and then we had a representative from a farmers group in the north, because we're looking at using sorghum, you know. So we had a representative from the sorghum farmers group, and so obviously as Accra Brewery was the one that was interested in the outcome of this working group, we had to be hosting the meetings, fly them to Tamale to go and see the farms and see whether there's enough sorghum being grown in the north to supply our needs, because you know, when you do large scale manufacturing, there's a certain minimum volume of raw materials that you must bring in. So we wanted to see whether the value chain was such that it would make it worth our while. So this committee obviously met several times, you know, and then they would ask for certain allowance and things like that. But that was a different era. So we had to provide that money and all, you know, and they'll go and they'll sleep overnight. So you have to provide a travel allowance and hotel accommodation and things like that. But anyway, their report then explained that, you know, excise at that time was a specific regime, and that it was applied to beer made from products not of local origin. So then the Commissioner General then gave us a ruling that said beer made from 100% local raw materials then is zero rated. And that's when we introduced Chibuku, if anybody ever heard of Chibuku or ever tried it. So Chibuku at the time was a zero rated beer, there was zero excise on it, and was very affordable. And that's why it was targeted at low income communities. And so as Kobe explained, the argument we presented was that you don't want people to be drinking things that are unhygienic. And if you are able to get more people to buy the products because it's affordable, what then happens is that more people can buy it, you know, so the business makes money. So you still get income from VAT, and you get income from income tax if we make more money. So you don't really lose that much, because the volumes will ensure that the loss of revenue from the zero rated excise would be made up elsewhere. And it was a convincing argument, and government was convinced that more farmers would benefit from the income, you know, and the health burden would be reduced, and hence that decision. A few years later, under Professor Atamil's government, we went back to the Minister of Trade and Industry then, Nana Tete, and presented that same arguments. And like I was explaining, you know, multinationals, we can't pay rents to influence decisions. So it was about making that same convincing argument And Hannah Tete was very convinced, and she became an advocate in government. The only condition she stipulated was that, look, your competitors also come to me, talking to me about the same thing. So the two of you work together. I don't have time to listen to you. And then as soon as you leave, your competitor too comes and is telling me the same thing. You know, so I'm going to speak with my counterparts at the Ministry of Finance, who was Dr. Before at the time, and get them on board and work together, you know, which was very, very difficult for us because we are fierce competitors. And so we had to now go and sit at table with Guinness Ghana Breweries, with Casapeco and everybody else in the industry. But for me, my philosophy is that, you know what, I'm a strong believer in that proverb that says that, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So I rallied everybody around, you know, and I'm proud to say I did a very great job of it. And I pushed my MD at the time. I'm like, you be the leader of the group. Don't allow that position to be filled by somebody else, because if we don't take control of this group, what will happen is that we won't get what we want. But if we take charge of it and we say that this is how we want it and convince everybody to come along with us, then what government will do is they would adopt what we want. So the rates that Kobe has posted were not the rates that existed before, but the format in which is what we put forward. And I'm happy to say that our proposal is what government adopted. And it was because the Minister of Trade at the time was convinced that it was in the best interest of the country, and she went to cabinet and defended it, you know, and we didn't have to influence her whatsoever. She got nothing from us for it, you know. She just believed that it was something that was good for the economy of Ghana and it would reap benefits. And it took quite a bit of convincing to convince the Ghana Revenue Authority that it was in their interest to back this. And we actually had to put a team together. I had a conversation with my counterparts at GGBL, and I said, listen, I suggest that we fly out a team to Uganda, because SAB Miller had a subsidiary in Uganda. Diageo, which is the parent company of Guinness Ghana Breweries, also had a subsidiary in Uganda. And this kind of excise regime had been running in Uganda for like about 20 years, and it was working. So let's take them to Uganda, let them go engage with the Uganda revenue officials. So it's not us telling them. Let them see for themselves, let them look at the numbers, the performance of excise in Uganda, and let them believe themselves so that they can come back and be advocates for us as well. And so we flew them out. They're like, these are conditions of service, because, you know, in our businesses, they don't give you a travel allowance. You go, everything is expensive, food is paid for, your hotel is paid for. Nobody gives you cash. The maximum you will get is like $50 a week, which is unaccountable, you know. Public service officials will tell you that, hey, please, we will get travel allowance. I'm like, please, you need to put this on GRA letterhead. The Commissioner General has to write to me and tell me that I have to give you travel allowance, and I'll pay that money to GRA, and GRA can give you the money, because I can't go against my company policy. And that's what we did. And so we split the bill 50-50. TGBL put up 50% of the money, we put up 50% of the money. We flew a team of 4 people to Uganda, and we covered their accommodation costs, and we took them to their breweries, our respective breweries in Uganda. They went and saw how the breweries worked. They were using local raw materials. They went to Uganda Revenue Authority. They saw how the calculations were done and the excise returns were done. Guinness also took them to some of the sorghum farms, you know, and then they saw it for themselves, and they came back as believers, you know, and that's how we got the sliding scale excise regime introduced, which is what pertains now. And I think, was it under John Mohammed's government? Yeah, I think it was under John Mohammed's government that the rates were revised, and I think one level was removed and the rates went up a bit, you know, to motivate the companies that if you use a lot more local content, you get a slightly reduced excise. And that's how Guinness stabbed us in the back. And they had no plans of introducing a cassava beer, but because we had to sit at the table with them and talk about what we needed, and we said, look, it's not just sorghum and millet and maize, you must add cassava. The next thing we saw was that they had introduced a cassava beer route, and so they got to the market before we brought Eagle. And it was quite painful, but nevertheless, these things happen in business.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Go
Kobe,
on.
you wanted to say something earlier on, so
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Abracadabra, he wants to ask a question.
Yeah.
Good morning, Adjoba.
Good morning. Is that your real name?
No, that's my other name. My real name is Godwin.
Okay, Godwin. Pleasure to meet you.
Okay, nice to meet you too, and thanks for coming. My question is a bit more on the conversation that came up where you have mentioned that businesses actually employ people and they go a long way to benefit other people as well,
Yes.
due to their respective families they have and they need to cater for. My question here is, let's take the banks for instance, the collapsing of the banks. Do we think they didn't present themselves well? Did they not do a proper advocacy? Or I don't know, because I felt like we could have handled it in a much better way. And if maybe the corporate advocacy team in Ghana or the board didn't maybe represent them well or something, I don't know, because you mentioned about how as advocacy we need to actually present ourselves very well, make a justifiable case for us to be heard. So in their case, do you think maybe they did present themselves well, but then the decision which lies in the honor of the government or the finance ministry didn't go in favor of them? That's my first question. My second question has to do with, so yes, you are right. In terms of gifts, most of the MNCs, multinationals, actually have a policy now around it. So in my previous firm, we are just allowed to have 25 euros of gifts. Now, this 25 euros, if you convert it into cedis, okay, it is something very small. But what 25 euros can do in Europe can buy something greater as compared to this side of the world. So in this case, we had our HR and then the comms team actually sit to align with the global policy. But then they also looked at how we also believe that in our culture, like the good example you made, that when you go to funerals and all that, you need to present a gift irrespective of whether you are allowed to or not, because it is now part of our culture. So what I can say about is what our HR here did was to infuse what our culture believes, okay? And then they fine-tune it, and then they shared with the global HR team to let them know that yes, 25 euros is the global field, but then we need to look at other respective geographical areas like Africa. 25 euros is way less, and you cannot even get anything to anybody. So there was a debate around it. They went to propose, and then it became more or less like, okay, this is a global standard, but in exceptional cases, you need to make a justifiable case for this, and it needs to be signed by your line manager or your HR director, and then you can be allowed. But even that, we started seeing that, yes, when we made the case in Ghana, if our advocacy was not that strong, we wouldn't have been heard. So that is the second bit I wanted to add. So the second one is not actually a question, but more like a comment. Yes.
Which is a great one, actually. So let me start from the second one, because, as I mentioned earlier on, I still do quite a bit of work in the area of the private sector and corruption issues, because at the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce, we lead on the private sector anti-corruption group, which is funded by the UK's Department for International Development around their strengthening action against corruption program, and they finance transparency, international work here, and all those things. But a lot of the Ghana Integrity Initiative and those other groups focus a lot more on public sector corruption. And so what we do at the private sector anti-corruption group is to focus on how the private sector can also help address those challenges so that it doesn't negatively impact on the bottom line of the private sector. And one of the things that we've been looking at is how to engage the public sector actors and the legislators around legislating around this thing around gift giving. because my own personal experience from Accra Brewery when it became a subsidiary of AB InBev was that AB InBev had a no gift given policy. There were no exceptions. And I was the compliance officer for Ghana. And I remember that I would attend all these compliance workshops, you know, where everybody in the group would be present. And we were trying to actually try and explain that Africa is different. And it wasn't just me speaking for Ghana, you know. All my counterparts from the other markets, Namibia, South Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, everybody was saying the same thing, that you can't do this in Africa. Our cultures are, you know, different from the Western world, you know. So if it's your policy in Brazil and it's your policy in Europe, it's your policy in the USA, it won't work in Africa. And we were told in no uncertain terms that they are not making any exception anywhere. It's one rule applies everywhere, you know. And so now that I'm wearing another hat, a different hat, where I'm on the other side of the table, the case I'm making is that, you know what, multinationals will come into this market and they have to be legally compliant. You get it? So in the same way that we have binding laws that explain about, you know, there's the Stool Land Secretariat, for example, where rent is collected on behalf of stools and families that have leased lands to lessees, you know. So like, for example, if government has acquired a land and they've sublet it to an organization, when you pay the ground rent to government, what government does is the part of that money is paid to the allodial title owners, who are the family that originally owned the land, or the stool that originally owned the land, through the Stool Land Secretariat, you know. So you know that, yes, it's legally binding on you, you know, to pay that money. Whereas if you were going to buy land and you went directly to the family of the stool and custom demands that you don't go empty-handed, right? So you're going to the chief's palace, you're buying land from the chief. You have to go with either money for a ram or the ram. You have to go with the schnapps. You have to go with the drinks, whatever, you know, just to go and introduce yourself and before you start negotiations. AB InBev's policy was that you can't do any of that. If you're buying the land, pay the cash and then that's it, you know, because the contract says that the land is maybe $200,000. So pay that $200,000 and that is it. It's consideration for the land. And anything beyond that is a bribe, you know. So, like I was explaining, what we are trying to advocate for is that why can't there be a law that says that, it mandates that, you know, the customary law in Ghana is this, and therefore multinationals must necessarily comply. Because if you don't do that, multinationals who are publicly listed companies on the New York Stock Exchange, London Stock Exchange or whatever, will continue to come with these policies that say that we don't do gifts given. And so either we adapt and change our customary law, or essentially, you know, we just go with them because they will not budge. Particularly because companies have been investigated and fined under the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And even though nobody has actually been convicted, you know, because by the time you've gone through that tedious process of investigations and you've been harassed to the point where you are frustrated, you are very happy to just pay a fine and let it end, you know. And businesses don't want to go through that because it's very disruptive. And then there's the UK Bribery Act, you know, so UK companies, US companies and their subsidiaries will not abide by these things unless it is law. You know, so Godwin, thanks for that. On the question of collapsing the banks and the huge impact or the huge fallout in terms of people's lives and livelihoods, yes, I agree with you. You know, this is why sometimes when governments are taking decisions, they look at public interest, they look at the greater good, you know. However, when it comes to the financial sector, I don't want to talk about any bank in particular or in general terms, because one, I'm not fully aware of all the details. I mean, where I have friends or I have family that work in particular banks, I can talk about things from their perspective. So I cannot generalize and say whether the government did a good thing or a bad thing, or that the businesses did not advocate effectively, you know. But the thing is that if you are law-abiding businesses and you comply with all the requirements of the Bank of Ghana, and you take steps to also demonstrate that where you have been negligent in any shape or form, you are taking steps to address the situation. I don't see why the government would not be a lot more lenient with you. So in this particular instance, I mean, I cannot speak to it because, you know, one of the things that I am very, very mindful of is that as a people, as Ghanaians, we are very, very indisciplined. I mean, I live in an area where I live on a cul-de-sac, and guess what my neighbors have done? They've blocked the road and said they're creating a gated community. And I'm like, excuse me, do I know you? This is a public road. And I complained to the assembly, and the assembly was like, if you have a problem, go to court. And I'm like, is this assembly effective or what? It's a public road. If they don't have a permit, they've blocked it, and they put security, that's the gated community. And now I have to go through their security. I'm like, what kind of nonsense is this? So, you know, it's not because it affects me personally, but it's a reflective of how we behave as a society. And my neighbors that are contributing to pay for the security see nothing wrong with it because they're like, but it makes the place nice and it secures the place. And I'm like, see where my house is and see where that gate is. How does that security benefit me? If a thief comes to my house, how would that security man see that the thief has come to my house? It doesn't benefit me in any way. It's a huge inconvenience. And as a planner, or at least I'm not qualified as a planner in Ghana, but at least I have a master's degree in urban planning and development. That is not the process for creating a gated community. As a lawyer, I have worked on rules for gated community, and we are not a homogeneous unit. So if somebody is not complying with the rules that you laid down, what can you do to the person? You can't do anything to the person.
And there was stakeholder engagement.
No, you know, and so it's a mess. We do what we want, we behave anyhow, and we believe that we should be treated leniently because we are remorseful and we've asked for forgiveness, or as good Christians or good Muslims, you have to forgive and forget. So people just behave anyhow and they expect to be forgiven. It's all wrong, you know. So not casting aspersions on any particular company or whatever, because I don't know what happened in each particular instance. And sometimes things can happen to businesses due to a series of unfortunate incidents, not because anybody was deliberately negligent, you know. So without being judgmental or anything, I believe that, yes, it was very unfortunate. So many people were affected. I have one of my team members who lost a job in the bank, and she tells me about how it affected her, you know, and she's actually very excited that she's finally got a job and things like that. So I know people who were personally affected. I have close friends that were directors at banks, you know, and they were very, very affected. Their reputations, they cannot be on the board of any financial or another bank, you know, because of the fact that they were directors on these failed banks. So the fallout was massive, and we all wish that it could have been handled differently, but unfortunately it's already happened, and we have to live with the repercussions of that, and learn the lessons also from that, to ensure that when you work in a regulated industry, you would make sure that you are compliant. I mean, in my own personal experience, I sit on the board of a Petra Trust. It's a pension fund manager, and it's highly regulated. And one of the things that we do at every board meeting is that the compliance officer comes to give us an update where there were lapses, what have we done about it, you know, and we make sure that we are up to date with all our regulatory requirements. And it's something that the board takes very seriously, because as I've just talked about in the collapse of the banks, the directors of those banks were also affected. They are being investigated by IOCO and all sorts of things, you know. So it's a fiduciary responsibility that you don't take lightly, and you have to make sure that when you are related to a business like that, in whatever shape or form, that they are ethical business, that they do all the right things, and that you're happy to be associated with them. So that's what I will say about it.
Thank you. Adjoba, there is one question from Yakubu, but before that, I've actually gotten one theory from your submission. You know, as academics, we're always theorizing. I think that there is a need for mapping what I call a corporate benefit chain, just like we
Yeah.
have corporate value chain. I
Mm.
think that there's a need for mapping corporate benefit chain where you look at, like the things that you mentioned, your staff, for example, when you pay them, who are other beneficiaries of that, and then when you pay taxes, how did they go?
Yeah.
If you can actually map that footprint in order to demonstrate your
Yeah.
contribution to society, I think that would be a great case study. And of course, some companies can
Yes.
do small videos to show their impact in society. So one
Yes.
employment, how many people does it lead to,
Yeah.
sustaining? One tax
Yeah.
that you pay, how many societies or social, goods that it actually leads to sustaining them. So I think that would be a very good thing that we can actually look into.
So, I mean, economists have a way of determining the multiplier effects, of a business. And I think the last time I worked on this, I actually worked with PwC Ghana. I had them do a social economic impact assessment for me, and they did a good job. I mean, I know I'm promoting them, but they can't be helped because I was quite happy with the outcome.
Yeah.
But before that, the ones that I've been involved in, we actually used external consultants. So if you go on the internet, you find that this is something that's actually done in more advanced countries on a regular basis. A lot of large corporates engage consultants to do this for them to determine the multiplier effect of their business.
Excellent.
Because it tells you that, the mere fact that you exist as a business, maybe 1,000 other jobs are created from a single transaction that you undertake.
Even small businesses and communities.
Yeah.
Yakubu.
Yeah, Doc. Madam Adjoba, thank you so much. Excellent lecture.
Yeah.
Okay, I have two questions. The first one is, in your submission, you on government business relations, you drop in NCA.
Yes.
I have a problem with our political landscape in Ghana here. You mentioned of license. Not long ago, NCA went and closed down some radio stations in the country. And particular two radio stations turned political. Like Radio Gold was closed down and XYZ was also closed down also. And the way it was carried out on the media, like they were politically targeted. And when we got to know much about the history of not renewing their licenses, I was like, how will you be in business and knowing very well that you are being regulated by a body and you need to renew your license yearly, but you are not doing that and you want to continue to be in business? That is one. The second one is Dr. Kobe mentioned of corporate social responsibility and thought of corporate Ghana, citing an example of MTM building schools in the country as corporate social responsibility, and mention of politicians chopping the money. That's why corporate Ghana has to go in that direction. I live in Tema, and there's a new municipal assembly called Tema West Municipal Assembly. It covers all the way to the Coca-Cola roundabout area all. And not long ago, early part of this year, I was appointed government appointee to the Tema West Municipal Assembly. Indomie Ghana, as a corporate entity, used to bring their product into the country from Nigeria. They've established market. The market is good. They set up a plant in Ghana now, in that area. I was invited to be part of the commissioning of the factory. But the road that leads from Kasaproko area all the way inside is very bad. Then I asked the assembly members that, are these people not paying taxes, or don't they do any corporate social responsibility, we could use their funds. There are a lot of big factories in that area. We could use their factory, their money to work on the roads so that the roads will be good for them. But unfortunately, because of COVID-19, the assembly is not meeting. Any time from now, we will start meeting. I want to ask, isn't it proper that the individual businesses in that area could come together and help to repair the roads instead of giving the money to the assembly? Thank you.
Yakubu, this is the big question, and it's not only a problem in Tema West Assembly, it's a problem everywhere. Look at my industrial area. I mean, I'm currently running the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce, and I do a lot of advocacy for my member businesses. We have about 134, 135 member businesses. And, so you'll find that a lot of the big UK companies are our members. Unilever, for example, Cockcultural Marchets, they're all UK businesses in Ghana that are our members. Then into my industrial area, I mean, I have friends and family that work in Nestle, Tropical Cables. You know, I go to DVLA in Tema when I need to renew my driving license and all of that. And the roads, I mean, it's shocking. It's so shocking. It's unbelievable. How many successive governments to date, and I think it's only, was it last year or so, 2 years ago, that they started working on some of the roads, you know? So it's something that always is constant. Every time we do a business health survey, it always comes up. Businesses are complaining that, look, we are paying our taxes, we pay property rates, we pay business operating permits, and we don't get the necessary social infrastructure that we need to make our businesses more sustainable. And so it's that thing about if they continue to pay and the government is using the income they earn from these or the revenue that they earn to do things in areas where they will get votes, you know, because you need an area with dense population and the number of votes that you need, whereas in the industrial areas or in the commercial areas, the people don't live there, they don't vote there, and there are fewer people, you know. So it's that kind of a balance, you know, and that's the price that we pay for democracy. But it also is not the thing to suggest that rather than businesses pay their property rates, they should rather use the money and then develop the social infrastructure. It's not the right thing to do, because what about the people who don't have that kind of money? What about the people who can't afford, you know? What it is that for those who earn that kind of revenue, who can afford to pay huge amounts in taxes and fees to the assemblies and things like that, it's supposed to, or in an ideal situation, it's supposed to go into that big pot that ensures that everybody that's a user of those facilities also gets to benefit from it, you know. I remember I used to have conversations with Dr. Dufour when he was Minister of Finance, when we were doing our industry lobbying activities, where he used to talk about social economics and the fact that that's what the NDC does, you know, and the fact that they have to ensure that they generate, because he was trying to explain why they needed to increase excise, and I was trying to explain, or we were trying to explain to him why we needed to keep excise at the rate it was or lower, you know, and why they needed the money, you know. And it's the same kind of conversations that I've had with the tax policy guys, you know, where they talk about why VAT, for example, had to be increased, because companies, not all companies are tax compliant. However, when you introduce consumption taxes like VAT and excise, when you buy the item, you are necessarily paying tax. Whereas if you are being asked to go and pay tax, you find a way not to pay it, you know. So government then gets more tax revenue if more people are paying consumption tax. Anyway, that's a conversation for another time. The short version of my answer is that I don't agree with you that businesses should rather use the money to provide the social amenities that they need. What businesses actually do is that as part of their corporate social investment activities, if they can afford it, sometimes they do these things. But where it's not possible, you can support the government institutions that need to do this. So let me just give you a typical example. When I was at Accra Brewery for years, I think ever since the brewery was established, you know, they were heavily dependent upon municipal water. And as you are very well aware, you're very well aware, sorry, beer is mostly water. So we use a lot of water in making beer. And so if municipal water for any reason got cut off, we only had enough backup to produce for one day. And then after that, if the water didn't come, we had to now shut down, you know. And we were connected to Wager. And so every time there would be a break in the pipeline or whatever would go off, we would now reach out to Ghana Water to find out what was the problem. And if there was a part that they didn't have, and we would take the initiative and then buy the parts and fly it in by DHL and bring it to them, you know, to fix it, because we needed the water.
Wow.
You know? Yeah, so these are the ways in which businesses support government efforts. If the companies can afford to do the routes, yes, why not? They should go ahead and then do it, because it benefits them and it benefits the community. So they would add it to part of their community support. However, they really shouldn't stop remitting taxes and fees and things.
Okay.
To the assembly.
Linda, you had a question.
So I just want to add to what Adjoba has just mentioned.
Okay.
So yes, I agree with her that businesses shouldn't stop paying the taxes. Earlier this year, I think Osafo Mafu also went on that same road. And when he was being interviewed on City FM, he was so pissed, but he made a very good suggestion that all the companies that are in that neighborhood can actually come together and put on advocacy to the government where their taxes will be reduced, and that to the tune of the total amount that it will cost to do that road. So I think it was just before we had the COVID, but he was actually proposing something of that sort, that the businesses needed to come together and come and see him personally. Okay. So I think stopping or not paying the taxes is not a good idea. But yes, maybe they can join hands for us and make an advocacy or something. Yeah.
Good. Now, because of time, guys, let's keep it short. Awin, then Samuel, that we can proceed.
Yeah. All right. Doc, thank you very much. And yeah, I'm really, really excited about this conversation. And it's you know, I just posted a concern because I live in Spintex, and anytime I pass by the Coca-Cola you know, road, I feel very, very sad because it's just so bad that I wonder whether they don't pay taxes or the government just doesn't want to support, you know.
And I think
companies.
That's the theory Adjoba told you about, where they come
exactly.
with.
My question is more of like, because it's an advocacy issue, my question is more of what has the chambers, I know we have chamber of this and chamber of that, what have they been doing or what can they do in this area, especially when there are policies formulated around roads and you know, infrastructure and other things? Are they part of, you know, these deliberations? Are they involved in the, you know, the conversation with government when policies are formulated? Are they involved in a way that they can actually lobby and facilitate some of these, you know, innovative ideas about how to make, you know, infrastructure more accessible to businesses? Because I think they have a strong say, they have strong, you know, they have access to resources to be able to do that. But I'm just wondering whether maybe if you can help to explain the opportunity for that to happen at the government level.
Okay. Adjoba.
Yes, so it's like you read my mind, Awin. It's on my notes here. I actually made notes, which I will share with Kobe after the call so that he can share with you guys. You really can't do advocacy on your own. It's not effective, no matter your class. You know, let me give you the typical example of Coca-Cola. I remember when we were lobbying government on excise, I used to just watch in amazement because this is me, lowly me. walking the corridors of the Ministry of Finance, GRA, you know, knocking on doors, harassing everybody, listen to me, you know, and I can be quite persistent. So eventually they get tired and they're like, give her whatever she wants and let her go, you know. However, I used to just watch in amazement, Coca-Cola, Ghana, and the might of the US Embassy, and the might of Coca-Cola Global. They would fly in the global CEO of Coca-Cola, and he would come in. He came in to come and meet Professor Tamils. And I was sitting there, I'm like, where is my CEO? And I was like, wow. And the US ambassador stepped in and said, you want to kill Coca-Cola in Ghana and the jobs and government was still not listening, you know?
Wow.
However, the point I'm driving at is that I had to now sit down and re-strategize and tell myself that, you know what, this is just me and I have no money. I can't fund any political party. I can't do anything. I can't support NDC in their bid for re-election. I can't do any of that, you know. So what other tools are there available to me? And common sense told me that, you know what, it would be in my interest to tie my cloth to Coca-Cola, to tie my cloth to Guinness, to tie my cloth to Casapreco, to tie my cloth to Pepsi, and tell them that let's go together. Because if we work together, what would happen is that, and this is like all the big beverage manufacturers, right? And government is more likely to listen to us if we speak with one voice and they realize that it's actually going to impact all of us negatively. And that's what we did. And when we started speaking, we were like, okay, so when we go, we are not a homogeneous unit, right? So how are we speaking, right? Because we can't go and say, okay, so Coca-Cola is here, Akabri is here, Guinness is here, and everybody speaks. It won't work that way. And I remember the MD of Guinness saying that let's go and register NGO and an association. I'm like, sir, with the greatest respect, you realize that AGI exists and we are all members of AGI.
Yeah.
So why are we not using AGI, you know? And the argument was that they haven't seen that AGI represents our interests. So anyway, I went to AGI and I said, you know what? You have a sector called food and beverage. And the food people have taken over. So when we go for meetings, Nestle is talking, Cadbury is talking, everybody is talking, and nobody is talking about beverage because we have issues that are peculiar to us, that affect us, that don't affect the food businesses, right? And if our entire executive is filled with food people, nobody's then talking for beverage. And that's why the beverage companies don't see any relevance. Mm-hmm. Has it occurred to you that perhaps you need to separate food from beverage? And they said, oh yes, it actually makes sense, you know? So I went to my counterpart at Guinness and I said, Madam, this is a conversation I'm having with the AGI executives. And I think that you should also go and have a similar conversation with them so that they see that this is very important to us. And this is how we managed to get food separated from beverage. And I'm proud to say that I played a great role in that. And I was the first beverage sector chair at the AGI. And prior to that, talking to people, they really didn't see the benefit of it. But you know, what I was seeing was probably different from what everybody was seeing because AGI has influence. Ghana Employers Association has influence. Ghana National Chamber of Commerce has influence, you know, and you would notice that successive government, no matter whether they're NDC, the NPP or whatever, they all listen to them. They listen to TUC. They listen to Ghana Union of Traders Association because fundamentally, they all come with constituencies and they have the numbers of people who are voters, right? And so it's very important for government to listen to these people. And that goodwill is something that if we had gone off and set up an association on our own, we would not have had that goodwill. And it's that goodwill that we needed to have a seat at the table, to have that conversation with government about what our needs are. And so if you are a company and you're a member of AGI, no matter your size, there's room for you. But if you don't speak up and you're not heard, you will not get any benefit from being a member of the AGI. AGI has a small scale sector, they have medium scale sector, they have large scale sector. So there's room for every size of business. And I used to attend the executive council meetings. It was very large because there's a regional chairman, there's a sector chairman, before there's a national executive, there's small scale sector chairman, there's a large scale sector chairman. So it's a very large group. And I remember sometimes We would go away for like 2 days, and at the end of the 2 days, I'm like, there was a whole lot of talking. What happened? But it's the price that you have to pay for being part of a group that has that level of goodwill. So when I went to the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce, one of the first things I did was call my old friends at AGI and say, look, I want to enter into an MOU with you because I need AGI and you need me as well, because AGI members also like to do business with the UK, you know, and so here I am promoting bilateral trade with the UK, between the UK and Ghana. And I know I need AGI because the UK produces manufacturing equipment. AGI companies are looking for manufacturing equipment. The UK has the CDC, they provide financing. AGI companies need financing. UK Export Finance provides insurance-backed guarantees to big projects. AGI companies work on projects and they need insurance guarantees, you know. So this is where then the connection comes from. And I was one of those people who was always skeptical about support groups. I never used to understand Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't understand why grieving mothers would go and join support groups. I never used to get it. But you know, one of the big lessons that COVID-19 has taught me is why we need support groups, you know, because at the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce, we are a member of the international network of the British Chambers of Commerce. And so in the early days when we were stuck at home and we were confused and we didn't know what to do and we were thinking that, hey, so if business collapse, they won't pay their dues, so we can't pay our salaries, we all have to go home, you know. And all of our work, or the bulk of our work, is premised on trade missions to the UK or trade missions from the UK to Ghana. You know, that's how we make money. We host networking events and we bring businesses together, we match them, and all this involves physically meeting. So if there's social distancing and there's a ban on social activities, what are we going to do? And there's an international travel ban, nobody can come from the UK, we can't go to the UK, we can't do anything, you know. But you know what happened? I then had time to now participate in a British Chambers of Commerce International Network meetings online. And you know the thing about relatability. So China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the Far East were all ahead of us in terms of the curve, right? So they had been through it. And it was very interesting listening to them and hearing them talk about how they have rallied around and the new ways in which they were working and how they were even attracting new member companies and they were still doing businesses. Wow. You know, and so if anybody follows us on social media or if any of you works for a company that's a member of the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce, one of the first things we did was we ran a business impact survey. And we asked companies that, what do you want to see government do to help you survive this? We were the first people to do it. And it was as a result of our international network. We got the idea from that, you know? And we ran a follow-up survey in a month to find out what has changed, because you had time to adjust to this, and are you doing anything differently, and is there anything else you need from government? And guess what? Government was very appreciative. Our report went to the economic management team. Professor Makutu took it. He quoted from it. He referenced that. The Minister of Trade got his people to call me. What else do your businesses want to know? And this is how you make yourself relevant. And this is what makes us relevant to our member companies. And we started hosting webinars, you know, about business continuity management, how are companies coping, what are lessons for other businesses. And all of this, we got it because we're a member of an association, you know. And when we speak, we don't say that this is just UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce. We say that, look, we are partners with AGI, and therefore, when we speak, we are speaking on behalf of businesses in Ghana. It's not just UK businesses, you know. We relate very well with the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce. When we have our trade missions, we sell it to their member businesses. For me, everybody is my friend. I don't look at them as competitors. Yeah. You would see from everything I've said today that, you know, wherever I've worked, I've reached out to my competitors. They're supposed to be my competitors, but we are not enemies, you know. Someone sent me a message privately to say that he lives with me in my pseudo yeah. You know, which is very interesting. It's unfortunate that we didn't know each other before, but today we have become friends.
That's right.
You see, even though I'm fighting with my neighbors over that gate, and I've filed a case in court against the assembly to compel them to do their work, it doesn't stop me from being friendly with my neighbors. Yeah. I'm still friendly with my neighbors. My next door neighbor behind me is my friend. My next door neighbor to my left is my friend. The one to my right is my friend. And when there's a problem, we talk. They are my speed dial. If something happens to me at night, they're the people I'm going to call because they'll get to me first before anybody else gets to me. You know, so support groups are very important. Being friends, in quotes, being friends with people and supporting each other, leaning on each other, is very, very important. And it's the same principle that we apply to government relations. So never ever discount the influence of AGI, TUC, GUA, GEA, GUTA, and all those people. And they really do a lot of advocacy work. It's just that, you know, when it comes to issues, there's prioritization. And so whatever is your topmost priority at the time is what you focus on. So maybe it's not that the roads and the social amenities are not important to them. It is. But perhaps other things are more important to them at this time. Business recovery is important. Accessing the COVID-19 Business Alleviation Fund is more important at this moment, you know. And you find out that AGI has a representative on the NBSSI board, for example. Why is that? It's influence. Why would government say that AGI needs to have a representative on NBSSI board? Because they understand that the National Board for Small Scale Industries is here to serve industries. And who represents industries? Association of Ghana Industries. So they have to be part of the conversation. Yeah. You know, so on the surface of it, you might not see that they are that relevant or they are that important, but they are really critical to our economic development and the success of our nation in terms of economic.
All right.
Yeah.
Samuel.
I hope
Yeah. You really covered it. Yeah. Samuel.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning, Kobe. Good morning, Adjoba. Nice to finally meet you. So actually, what I wanted to say at the time was in relation to what I think Yakubu highlighted regarding the roads around Casapreco and Coca-Cola. And then I think Abracadabra also touched on it with regards to Safamafo's comments. And it's really true and it's really key. I just wanted to bring across a little experience and information that I gathered in that, like the mining companies, for example, you know, they pay royalties. And in the past year and a half or so, they've been engaging through the Chamber of Mines, Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, Roads and Highways, the Ministry of Finance, and the EMT, just to actually, you know, a lot of the mining communities are really, really, I'll say, underserved with regards to infrastructure and amenities and things like that. And their roads are so bad, very deplorable. So they're trying to discuss a way that they can use the royalties to fund the road construction so that all the mining communities will have their roads done. And this is an initiative by the mining companies and the Chamber of Mines so that they can help government in this regard to fix these things. And so it's key, like she said, on the advocacy and having an arrangement, having discussion. You don't necessarily have to stop paying your taxes or stop paying your royalties, but you can have a discussion where a part of it can be directed towards these infrastructure needs and things like that. And that's what advocacy brings. And I work with the GIPC, so we deal a lot of all the chambers, and in everything that we are doing. For example, we have our breakfast meetings where you have government and industries and private businesses engaging to discuss policy formulation and the effects of certain reforms and things in the business environment. And you always need these people to engage so that you can go in the right direction, understand needs and concerns and challenges, and be able to do what's best and what's right to inform government, to inform policy formulation, to benefit the business environment and actually attract more investment, because that's our job. Anyway, so yeah, I think I just wanted to touch on that and give more elaboration on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Bridget. Hello, Bridget. Yeah. Your karaoke has started again.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah. Can you say?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning. Oh, can I?
Yeah. Say it again.
Can I go on? I'm still singing.
Yeah, you're still in karaoke.
Yes, you are singing.
Okay, try again.
She has an
okay, can I go on?
Yeah, Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So I just want to ask that with what we are learning right now, can maybe a third person or a third party, an individual, go and advocate for business or a particular industry? Let's take the Casapreco road issue, for example. Can I, as a third party who is not directly benefiting from that road, but because I benefit from probably their product, can I go and then advocate for them? I just want to know if that works.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that societies or communities have actually advocated for certain initiatives. I mean, one of them that actually comes to mind is the Build Our Bridges Now. I don't know whether you remember recently in a group that just to say that I'm part of actually pushed government to actually complete the bridges. So of course you could say that, well, they live in the society, but you can actually say that they're a third party group as well. All right, so nothing stops a third party group obviously being a stakeholder to actually advocate for something that actually concerns them. So certainly it is possible.
Okay.
Okay, now Linda.
Yes, Adjoba, thank you very much. It's been amazing so far. Prior to commencement, you mentioned that you're going to be sharing successes and failures with us. And so I think I've spotted something that is not so much of a success. And that is regarding what happened when you met with the competitors to, in order to get the excise duty for the production of that beverage.
Yeah.
And what happened was that some trade secrets, leaked, and so your competitor used that as an advantage.
Yes.
And so they started with the production before you did.
Yes.
My question is, what could you have done differently in order to ensure that, that portion of your trade secret was not leaked to your competitor? Or if I am faced with such an a challenge, what do I do to ensure that I don't let out my trade secret to my competitor while we're trying to deliberate to meet government together? Now, my second question is with regards to giving gifts in the state of trying to lobby for something. It's easier said here. It's easier said than done. Now, when you're faced with the reality, for example, even getting something like an exemption letter, which at least I think you get twice every year sometimes. Simple things like that. If you do not, give a certain kind of gift, you wouldn't get it. So I know that you might be saying it this way, but you may have encountered a situation where really sometimes if you don't give a certain kind of gift, there's certain barriers that you will not be able to cross. I mean, I've worked with three multinational companies, and these are realities that you face out there sometimes. So in the midst of such a challenge, what were you able to do when somehow it was demanded of you that you had to give a certain kind of gift, especially when you have to relate to the public sectors? What did you do? And so my third question is a bit gender biased. As a woman, how easy or how difficult has it been doing this whole thing of advocacy? I would be grateful if you can share just some of the challenges and how you were able to, or how you have been able to overcome it, because you're still doing it. So how have you been able to overcome this?
And then given that we have a very machoistic society, right?
Yes. So that's a very it's a very important question, because it's something that I'm not usually asked, but I'm very much aware of the fact that being a woman can be a hindrance, and it attracts all kinds of challenges that my male counterparts face. So yes, I will definitely address that to help my fellow women in the group. But before I get to that, Linda, are you done?
Yes, please. I asked 3 questions. Yes.
Okay, so let me come to the first one about not leaking trade secrets, because Kobe has talked about doing advocacy when you're not an interested party in the matter? And I believe he has answered the question. But what I will add to that is that, you know, another reason why businesses do government relations is because you also want to be a part of the government machinery when it comes to public education and influencing public behavior. You know, so one of the things that I remember having to do, because at some point I worked for both Accra Brewery and Baltic, because they were both subsidiaries of SAB Miller at that time. So I remember being part of the stakeholder engagement around plastic waste, you know, and one of the key things that we kept on emphasizing is that, yes, the businesses can do something about it, we can run campaigns, but if the public education and our educational system is not such that people are aware of the fact that you shouldn't dispose of plastic anyhow, whatever we do will come to naught, you know, because as a business, where we have control is what we do with our plastic waste, and we were taking care of it and ensuring that it didn't go to landfill. However, consumers were not treating the plastic in the same way in which we advocated. So we had to be part of the conversation. Anyway, and so that's the way in which you get the public involved. And so people can actually take up your cause and advocate for you because they are also an end user of your product, not necessarily because they use that road or it affects them. So yeah, just to add to what Kobe said. Now back to Linda's question, not leaking trade secrets. In that particular instance, really, there was nothing that we could do about it. Our hands were forced because government had a policy of commercializing certain agricultural produce or products, you know, and upscaling them from being subsistence farming methods to large commercial scale agriculture. And so from the government side, they were focused on particular crops, right? So we had to tell them, like, look, we are interested in cassava, and therefore you need to include cassava. So we had no choice but to state it and to ensure that it was captured as we needed it to be captured. And in that particular instance, perhaps I need to give a little bit more detail. SAB Miller had a small brewery somewhere in the UK, which was like a test lab where they would like try new recipes, try new products, and ensure that they get it right and it gains acceptability before they actually roll it out on the commercial scale. So it was like a pilot brewery. And they had been trying to work with all sorts of different starches because, you know, beer is made from carbohydrates products. So you can make beer from anything that is a carbohydrate product. So you can make it from yam, you can make it from any grain that is starchy or whatever. And so they tried so many different crops that are grown in the tropics. And the one that seemed to work very well was cassava. And they tried to work with cassava in different forms because cassava is highly perishable. So by the time you carry it from the farm and you get the brewery, it probably would have gone bad. You can't use it. So you have to find a way in which you can get the material to the brewery in a way that you can use it, you know. And so they tried starch, they tried cassava dough, or we would say cassava dough, but they would call it cassava pulp or whatever, to grind it and turn it into pulp and carry it to the brewery. And they tried it in so many different forms. And you know, around that time, our Yinsu Starch Factory had been set up, so we knew that we could get starch from our Yinsu Starch Factory. But then, for some reason, I mean, and like I said, in terms of the chain of command, we are at a very low end. You know, they decided that cassava starch wasn't the way to go, you know, and that they had found a business in Holland that would come in and bring a machine to the farm, and then the cassava will go in, and then they will grind it, and then they will carry that as a cake and bring it to the brewery, and that was the best way to do it. So needless to say, when we couldn't start if we didn't have that excise break, because otherwise all our numbers will not make sense, right? So when we got the Excise Act amended and we got that excise break, we now had to now ship the equipment and bring it to Ghana. And you know how long a ship takes to travel to Ghana. So in that intervening period, our competitors quickly went to our starch factory and bought starch and made the beer from starch. So, you know, there was nothing we could do about it. Yeah. However, in response to your question about how can you prevent yourself from giving out your trade tickets so that your competitors cannot take advantage of it, I mean, if you're in a situation where you don't have to talk about what you're doing, then don't talk about it. Just don't talk about it until you're ready to talk about it, you know? And that's the only advice I can give you. But in our circumstance, there was nothing we could do about it because we really needed government support, and we needed for government to know that this is what we were planning, you know? So it was unavoidable. And the thing about gifts as well, in our current circumstances, you're lucky in the fact that there are so many companies that don't do gifts, and public sector officials and everybody knows about it. World Bank, they don't. And they've had this policy for years, right? Unilever, I remember many years ago. Well, how long ago? This must have been, this was my multimedia days, and I left multimedia in 2005. So 2003, 2004, thereabouts. They actually wrote to us and said to us that, please don't send us Christmas gifts because our policy is that we don't receive gifts, you know? So everybody knows that Unilever doesn't give gifts and they don't receive gifts. So when they come to you, you're not going to ask them because you know? So you have these people as pay setters, and you can reference it that just like the World Bank doesn't give gifts and they don't receive gifts, we also don't give gifts, and so I can't. However, our part of the world is such that, you know what, in certain social circles, we all know each other, you know? So I believe that one of my key strengths is that I have a very wide network because I went to I went to 3 primary schools, so I have a lot of mates from primary school. I went to 2 secondary schools, I have a lot of mates from 2 secondary schools, schoolmates, classmates. I went to the University of Ghana, I have schoolmates from the University of Ghana. I went to law school, I have lots of mates from the University of Ghana. My law class was, until now that there are many law departments in almost all the universities, we were the first law school class that was more than 100 in our group. So I have lots of mates, both in my year and then in the other years. So it's very rare for me to go to an institution and not know anybody. It's very, it's more the exception than the norm. So what then happens for me is that I've been quite fortunate with regards to the fact that wherever I go, I tend to know somebody. And it's my generation that's in charge, you know. I mean, I'm lucky in that regard. It's my generation that is walking in the corridors of power. So I have mates that are in government, ministers, deputy ministers, in parliament, heads of institutions, you know, MDs and things like that. So this is my time to do corporate affairs. I mean, when I'm older and my mates have retired, then that's when I also retire. Because I don't need anybody. You know, I'm uniquely positioned, right? And so that's helped me very well in the sense that I have never had to now bribe my way to get anything. But on the contrary, what it has done is that it hurts my pockets personally. So I remember the day I walked out of Accra Brewery, that what I told myself is that I'm never ever going to take a job that doesn't pay me well enough to be able to honor my personal obligations. Because what was happening is that now, when my friend is bereaved and I'm going to that funeral, I'm paying that funeral donation from my pocket. Is hosting a 50th birthday party and invites me and I'm going. That birthday gift I'm taking, it's coming from my pocket.
And the company
benefits. Move.
The company is not going to pay for that.
But the company benefits from that.
But when I go to my friend and the Ministry of Finance, I mean, let me tell you a funny thing. So I deal with tax policy, right? And every time a new head of tax policy is in place, I go and I make friends with the person. So the current head of tax policy, guess what? I go and I'm like, I know you. Guess where I met him? At a mutual friend's 50th birthday party. And this thing about striking up random conversations with strangers. So I met him at the party and I just chatted with him. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he did. I didn't ask him what he did. He didn't ask me what I did. You know? And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I go to Ministry of Finances, the new head of tax policy. I'm like, wow. Imagine if when I met him at the party, I looked him up and down and walked past him. Imagine.
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah.
So personal relationships also come into play, right? And like I said, in terms of my time and my pocket, it's been quite difficult because what tends to happen is that I'm always going to funerals, outdooring, I'm there, wedding, your son is getting married, I will come. I'm a very, very, very supportive friend in that regard. I'm that friend who will come and I'll come and help serve. And if you give me work, I will organize everything and I'll be ushering. I'm always busy at events, you know. And you know, this is how you build loyalty. This is how you build trust. And trust is very important. If people know that you're reliable, they can count on you, you're dependable, they will do anything for you, I tell you. So Linda, there's ways in which you can get things done without actually spending money, being supportive. You know how Ashanti's and funerals, and your Ashanti friend is bereaved. Make sure you are there at the funeral. Go and support that person. You get have money to donate your time, you know. Volunteer. Me, I do a lot of volunteering. Today I'm here volunteering. I'm talking to you. I remember saying to Kobe 2 years ago that don't be calling me to come and talk and not giving me any money.
Yeah.
You know. And he said, I don't have any money to give you. And in spite of that, I'm here today, I'm volunteering. And guess what? How many people are on the call today? There are 46. If you take myself, there's 46 people. I've made 46 new friends.
That's
you
right.
know. If I meet you and I don't remember you, please forgive me. I meet too many people. Sometimes I forget. But talk to me, come to me and remind me that you were in the weekend MBA class.
I will look for you.
Yes, remind me.
Excellent.
I will look for you.
All right. We have only 2 people. Please let's take
the thing about being a woman.
Yeah.
So being a woman is a handicap and is also an asset. And one of the things I've been lucky is that I have quite a strong personality, and I am quite what's the expression? I can be quite dogmatic in my position. So if I believe that something is good for everyone and is good for the company and it's good for me and it's something that would benefit the business greatly, I'm like, my former colleague used to say, Adjoba is like a Rottweiler. I will sink my teeth and I will not let go until we have got what we want. So in terms of that personality, it has its negatives. But the positives are that one, for the bulk of my career, more often than not, when I sat at a table with my peers, I've been the only woman, right? And when you're a woman and you don't speak up, nobody hears you. Nobody's going to ask you anything. Nobody's going to sort of beat you with kid gloves just because you're a woman. You need to be able to speak up. If you want something and you don't ask for it, you will not get it. If you think something is wrong and you don't agree with your colleagues, you know, men can talk. Please, nobody should argue with me on that. Men can talk.
It's true.
Men can sell themselves. They are really good salespeople. They will sell themselves and you buy and you find out that the person has oversold himself. He can't even
we'll call it grab.
Madam Adjoba.
Yes.
Please, so just to chip in, what is your take? What is your take on Muhammad running mate as a male, as a female?
Oh, Yakubu.
I'm very proud of the fact that she's accomplished. I'm very proud of the fact that she's capable. And let me caveat it by saying I'm not NDC. And I'm very proud of the fact that Muhammad chose her, you know, because you see, the thing also about putting women in positions of leadership, it's not just tokenism. It shouldn't be. It should never, ever be. When you're hiring a woman or you're putting a woman in a leadership position, you need to put a woman that is capable, that has a proven track record, you know? Mm-hmm. And so for me, I mean, I used to be that person who always used to say that I prefer working with men because they're not emotive, they just get the work done, there's no drama and things like that. But you know what? And anybody that I've worked with, my former colleagues in management will tell you that I used to be the one who used to always say, women, they're just too troublesome and they don't come to work and they're emotional and you didn't check on me and my child was sick and you didn't call me. And I'm like, it's too much drama. But let me tell you, and I'm saying this from experience, all the women I have worked with in my career did a much better job than the men I worked with. And I can say that authoritatively. And so, you know what, for me, well, if there's a man and there's a woman and they are both have the same qualifications and they have the same experience, I'm more likely to go with a woman because you know what? When women are good, they're very dedicated and they'll deliver. A woman knows that I have a husband, I have children, I have kids. When they come,
right.
they will do their work and make sure that it's done so that when they go home, they can focus on their family. I tell you, they do much better than men.
Yeah.
So
True.
I'm excited and I'm looking forward to seeing the battle as it unfolds, but I'm cheering her on.
Excellent.
Anyway, so
All
back to the thing about gender. Let me finish before I forget.
Yeah.
So it's been difficult, but you know the other thing also is that I never went into a job having at the back of my mind that it's unequal, that I'm special, that women, gender was never on my mind, to be honest, because I mean I talked to my parents and my grandma. I have two mothers, my birth mother and my stepmother, and so I'm privileged in that regard. And they were all professional women, accomplished in their fields. My grandma, all my three grandmothers were career women, juggled home and family. So for me, the examples in my family, my dad's sisters, my stepmom has one sister. They were all career women, and they all worked. So I don't know any difference, right? And perhaps I may say I'm also lucky in the sense that I was born in an environment where there was never an issue about you're a woman, so you can't do this. You know, I went to schools where it was like taken for granted that you could do whatever you wanted to do. You could excel at whatever you wanted to do. So it was never at my forefront that I'm a woman, so I'm not capable of doing anything, or I shouldn't do this, or I shouldn't do that. That was never an issue. So I always walked into a job not focusing on gender, right? However, looking back, I realized that the reason why maybe I managed to sustain those roles was probably through the sheer force of my personality. So I would take jobs where I would more or less go and start the portfolio of whatever it was I was doing, right? I would build it from scratch because it's also not in my nature to do nothing. So if you put me in a place where there's no job description and the role is not very well defined, the next thing you will see is that I've created my own job description. I found work for myself and I'm working. And the next thing you will see is that I'm there on a platform and I'm promoting what I'm doing and everybody is hearing about the business. It's not so much about me as the individual, but it's so much about the business. And like I went to Accra Brewery, Couple Affairs was a very young function. I was the third person to be in that role. There was no budget. I had zero budgets. My entire budget was just my salary and I was the only person in it, in the budget, right? And I remember I'd go for meetings and I'll stand up and I'll say, my name is Adjoba Kyiamah and I work for Accra Brewery. And they're like, hey, na company, no more that's they're not, are you not, you know, because remember there used to be 4 breweries and 3 became 1. So the 3 breweries, Kumasi Brewery, Guinness Breweries, and Achimota Brewery, which became Ghana Breweries, now have become Guinness Ghana Breweries Limited. Yeah. So that's 3 breweries in 1. So Accra Brewery has always been on its own and is still the one that is still standing, right, on its own. The other ones merged. So people were like, are you not part of Guinness? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, hey. Then people will ask me, what do you produce apart from club? And I'm like, oh, we have custom mode more styles. And they're like, hey, then we don't know, you know. And the vow I made to myself from that moment was that never would I go anywhere and stand up and say, I'm coming from Accra, and they're like, what company is that? Never again. And I'm proud to say that it was something that I accomplished. You know, till today, people don't even know that I've left. People still call me and think that, and you know, when they say Accra Brewery, they're like, oh, that lady. And I think my gray hair also helps, so I stand out. And I remember getting to that point where if there was anything that related to industry, anything to do with beverage, anything to do with manufacturing, I would actually get a call. And I'll get a call from Ministry of Finance and they'll tell me that, hey, please call your people and tell them that this. Do you get it? Mm-hmm. So in that regard, I would say that, yes, my personality helped. However, there were areas where my gender was a hindrance. So you find out that men, you know, I work for a beer company, but I don't drink beer. I never drank beer. And
Internet challenges. Is everybody there? I think.
To become Commissioner General under Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. It was a very easy thing for us to rekindle that friendship, you know. So the thing is that, yes, in that regard, it's difficult. And then there's also perception. Sometimes you engage with somebody and they are looking at you. And, you know, I mean, me now, I think I've managed to now grow to the point where I now look like my age, right? But for many years before, I was quite skinny and I looked very young. People didn't believe me when I mentioned my age, and they would tell me that you don't look your age, are you sure? And I remember back in the days when I was a multimedia, Mr. Chum is not very public facing. He doesn't like publicity towards himself. So anything that he was invited to, he would send me. So he was supposed to be on the University of Ghana Alumni Council, for example. He would go for the meetings and he's like, okay, I've said yes, but since you're also an old student of the University of Ghana, you can go and represent me. So I used to go for the meetings for him. So it wasn't my place, but I used to attend the meetings. And I remember people would look at me and think that Akalawi is where you wine, you know, and so it was a hindrance. I mean, one time AMA officials came into the office and the guy walks in, I think he sees me and he's like, my dear, and I'm like, who is your dear? Please, you don't know me, I don't know you. You can't just walk in and call me. Address me properly, you know, and so yes, little things like that. When I've spoken to the law students, they've asked me about sexual harassment, and you know, I used to say that maybe I'm not attractive, so I've not had a problem. But upon reflection, I realized that that was not true. You know, perhaps I developed a way of deflecting things like that, so it was never an issue for me. I'm not a naturally smiling person, you know, so if I'm engaging with people on a business level, you're not going to get the opportunity to even move away from the business conversation, you know, and it's my nature, I can't help it. I think I had more of a problem when I tried to practice law, because you're trying to recruit clients and you're trying to win business, and you're talking to people who already have lawyers and have no reason to change their lawyers, and you're trying to convince them to bring their business to you, and you need money to feed yourself and pay your bills, you know, and then they are saying, okay, so can we meet over dinner, or okay, or can we do lunch, or can I come and visit you at home so we talk about this first? And I'm thinking, what has coming to visit me in my house got to do with the business? You know, so yes, it can be a challenge when you're a woman, but like I tell all the young women that have worked with me or that have interacted with me, I'm like, you know what, you've got to be strong and learn to say no and define boundaries. When people know that you are self-disciplined and you will not compromise on your values, and don't be afraid to speak up. If something bothers you, speak up, say it bothers you, and push back, you know. There are certain things that really you shouldn't do, you know, as much as possible. Don't do big one-on-one business dinners if you're not interested in progressing the conversation beyond work, you know. I mean, there's some things that I will not do, you know, and you've got to be conscious of it, because sometimes it's subtle. It's very subtle, so you might not see it coming, but you've got to be conscious of the fact that there are some things that you need to put boundaries and try and work within those boundaries. And you know, I've always, when I've had men on my team, there are certain things and there are certain assignments that I would say the guys should do it, and I'll explain to the women that that's not to say you're not capable, but like particularly when we had to do community engagement in like rural areas, you know, or peri-urban areas, and I'm sending somebody to the assembly, I would send the guy on the team, because I'm like, you know, these people have a certain perception and they're going to be more receptive to the guy. They're going to respect him more, and they're going to listen to him, you know, because you, as a woman, you know how it is, how you go out for a meal with a guy and you're the one paying. Meanwhile, when they bring the bill, they bring it to the guy because they assume that the guy is the one going to pay for it, you know. I mean, I have heard rumors even about myself about how I have a sponsor, and I'm thinking, are you telling me that all the work I've done all these years and the money that I can't afford to get my own house, I can't afford to buy myself a car? What do you mean? You know? Yeah, so these things happen, but it's something that comes with the territory, and you've got to just learn to manage it and balance it. So, Linda, I hope I've answered your question.
Very much so. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think you can proceed with the rest of your. If you have other notes, you can proceed with them.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Let me see what people have.
Okay, Pfizer has a question.
Hey, somebody, sorry, Abracadabra says, what is chasing Adjoba? I don't understand the question.
When you mentioned that your male friends will be chasing, I want to know what the chasing is.
No, I don't even, what was the context? What was I talking about?
That you have male friends in other companies, and
when they went
they
hanging
were
out with
like your friends, they went hanging out, and then they'll be chasing.
Yeah.
Oh, this is me. The things that they come and tell me is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Pfizer.
Read all the message.
Right, yes. Yes. So, Madam, first of all, I would like to express my love for the way you look. I don't know if I am allowed to.
Hey, did you ask permission from Yakubu?
Now, I'm sorry then, I'm sorry. So let me go straight to my questions. I have two of them.
Go straight to the point.
The first one is that when you represent a business group, so let's say like you mentioned beverages, how are you able to handle conflicting interests within the group itself? So you must present one side to maybe the government or an external body, but amongst your members who you are representing, there seems to be some conflict regarding their interests. How are you able to manage that? That is my first question. Now, my second question is this. It will take us back to last week, the lecture we had. I cited an example of an amendment to our laws to ban the importation of certain cars to inure to the benefit of the new local manufacturing industry of cars. Now, the feedback I got from the class was that even though that amendment is good for the business folks, as in the VW and the rest who are coming in, as far as the ordinary Ghanaian is concerned, it may not be too good because of our low income levels. So there's a conflict between the foreign private interest, or let's say the local private interest, and the interest of the ordinary Ghanaian who has low income. If you are in the position you are now, you are representing the, let me say, the UK business community in Ghana. If you find yourself in that situation, which of the two, conflicts will sway the way you advocate? Will you be more considerate towards the low income of Ghanaians, or you will be swayed towards advancing the interests of your business group that you are representing?
Right. Thank you very much for your kind words and compliments. I'm grateful. But I can't take credit for my looks, so it's maybe good genes and my parents. So I'll pass on your thanks. On your questions relating to managing conflicting interest in a group, as I mentioned before, the greater good has to always prevail. And when you do relationship building, it's always about a win-win situation for everybody. You don't want one side to feel that they're the victor and then the other side feels like they're the loser, and you don't get what's the word? You don't get buy-in from everybody, and you really need everybody to rally around and support each other and focus on what the common goals or the common interests are. So it's just like if you have a family, if you're a parent and you have children, the same way you keep peace amongst your children and ensure that one doesn't feel as if another is the favorite to their detriment and things like that. So you build relationships with everybody on the team, know everybody's strengths, what motivates them, what their interests are, and ensure that you're meeting everybody's needs to the extent that you are able to. When it comes to competing objectives, like I said, you need to focus on what the greater good is, or the group interest, what the group interest is. And that one person or that group, subgroup that has an interest that conflicts with that majority interest, you've got to now find a way to advocate and engage with them to get them to come to your point of view. So that's why I talked about internal engagement as well, that when you do stakeholder engagement, it's not just about the external facing part of what you do, there's also internal buy-in. So when you take a company, for example, if your employees don't know what you're about, don't know what your strategy is, don't know what your goals are, they don't know what your values are as a business, they don't know what your vision is, they don't know what your mission is, do you think you achieve any of that? No, you won't. And when your employees go out, they really are representing your business. So you need them to be advocates for your business as well. And you do this without letting them even know that, you're nudging them in a certain direction. So that's why we have internal communications, there's regular meetings, there's staff there's all of that. It's all about sort of, the word propaganda is a bad word, but really that's what it is. It's about using propaganda to ensure that people actually buy in without even realizing that they bought into whatever it is that you're advocating. And so you will do the same thing within any business association or group. Now, with regards to competing oh, who is laughing?
Yakubu.
Hey, Madam Adjoba.
Yes.
I just love the propaganda aspect. I'm a political person.
Okay.
Yakubu.
And I've realized that, and I'm an MPP person. We don't have propaganda secretary, but the NDC have a propaganda position in their party.
Yakubu.
Yakubu.
Okay.
Yakubu, why?
As Kyiamah J said, Kyiamah J of Blessed Memory said, there's many ways to skin a cat. So that's how to kill a cat. So people have ways, but it's the same thing, really. We are all political animals. Whether we do mainstream politics or it's office politics or whatever, we are all political animals.
Yeah.
Even in a family setting, we are all political. Like I said, I come from a blended family. So we do politics everywhere. You have to juggle everybody's interest,
Yeah.
So when people say that when somebody says they are not political, please, it's not true. It's not true at all.
Yeah.
Even amongst your siblings, you are political.
Yeah.
And so propaganda, we do propaganda everywhere. And let me give you an example that was told to me that I had never actually realized. You know how when you go into a supermarket and you are going to the till or the counter to go and pay, what do you see as you are approaching the till? You see things like sweets. In some countries, you see cigarettes, you will see chips and things like that. All the things that are not good for you that you shouldn't buy. It turns out that it's in terms of store layout and positioning these things, it's deliberate. They call it nudging. Yeah. You are being nudged, to buy the thing without you even realizing that you are being nudged to buy it. And that's the same sort of thing that you do. Sometimes, in truth, we are all like puppets. And we are being sort of
nudged here and there,
pulled along to do stuff without even realizing that you are being directed, So in terms of advocacy, that's the same sort of thing that you do. When you speak words, you're trying to win people over and get them to do what you want them to do. But you don't want them to feel as if they are doing it because you said so. It's because you want them to feel as if they are convicted, that they actually believe in what they're doing, and that is the right thing to do. And so you apply that same kind of propaganda theory in whatever you do. But the thing about conflicting interest and me working for the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce and promoting UK interest and promoting vis-a-vis Ghana's interest, they're not conflicting interests, to be honest. We work very closely with the British High Commission here in Ghana because they represent the UK government. So in that regard, we work closely with the UK government as well as with the Ghana government because they're both key stakeholders in what happens to Ghanaian businesses on the Ghana side and what happens to UK businesses in Ghana on that same side, and then what happens to UK businesses and their subsidiaries in Ghana. And what they have is a working group called the UK Ghana Business Council, which is currently chaired by Alhaji Dr. Muhammadu Bawumia on the Ghana side, and then the UK Minister for Africa on the UK side. And so they meet and they agree on areas of cooperation, you know, and the economic sectors where they are going to be working together on, where the UK can support Ghana, you know, and things like that. So because of that, there's no way that I'm going to have a situation like, was it Yakubu? That's it. I can't remember. Somebody spoke and asked this question. Faisal, yeah. I'm never ever going to have that kind of situation where I'm conflicted in that regard, because whatever we do and whatever we promote is sort of something that's emanating from that UK Ghana Business Council, you know. So we focus, like right now, our areas of focus are promoting business in certain key economic sectors, and these economic sectors were as defined by the UK Ghana Business Council, and they were focus areas that were put forward by the Ghana government, and they said to the UK government that this is where we want to collaborate on, you know. So things like agro-processing, financial services, digital, oh, sorry, I think I'm getting a bit tired. There's a few areas that I've left out. So I've talked about agro-processing. Okay, they might come back to me. They might come back to me later. But underpinning all of this is infrastructure development and revenue mobilization and helping the Ghana government to become more efficient at how they do their work. So you see that DFID, for example, is doing a lot of work with the GRA, you know, in improving revenue mobilization. And then when it comes to infrastructure development, you see UK Export Finance providing insurance guarantees for Contractor. Contractor is a company building the Kejitia market. They're doing Tamale Airport. I think they're doing Kumasi Airport and things like that. So there's a lot of UK funding behind those projects. Extractive sector is also one, you know. So Talo Ghana is a UK company. There's a lot of work also that's going on in that area. These days we are looking at the green economy and things like that. So there's no way that I'll be in that conflict of interest position, because my work comes out of that. So there's a lot that happens behind the scene that may not be visible to somebody if you're not close to us. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, guys, we're just about time, 11:26, so our time is 11:30. I think that we have one question, abracadabra. We won't take any question again, then Adjoba can wrap up. Because we've taken, yeah.
So Adjoba, the last question for me, mine is on the take of the Brexit, because I was in a multinational firm when I realized that right after the Brexit, some UK delegates came, visited Ghana specifically, and this company is actually an Anglo-Dutch company, to be specific, Unilever, and I was part of the team at the moment. So we made known that because of the Brexit, the focus more was going to be in Africa. I would want to ask you on this. What's your take on the Brexit? And if the focus is going to be on Africa, is it just Ghana, or which countries are we looking at, and why Africa?
You're putting me in a very difficult position. I'm going to have to say sorry. Yeah. I can't speak to any of this because, you know, my position is unique in the sense that if I said anything, you would think that it's a reflection on, or it's the official position. And since I don't speak for the UK government, and I have to remain neutral in that regard, I can't say anything.
I think that's
okay. Clear.
All right. Yeah. So, if you can please wrap up.
what they say, and that will be it. If whatever it is that the position is, you'll find it on the UK government HM website.
Yeah, so if you can please wrap up then, because the time is.
So the things that remain on my speaking notes that I wanted to talk about is why I wanted to finish on why government relations is important. That from everything that I've spoken about today, if for nothing else, I hope you understand that it is something that you cannot leave to chance. You have to be intentional about what you do and how you engage and what you expect out of it. And so you must necessarily have a strategy. And as you go along, when things change, you know what you do with strategy, you review it, you amend it, and you carry on. So we've talked about building a relationship with government agencies, legislators, etc. You do this through one-on-one meetings, group discussions, whatever. Any opportunity you get, you engage. You know, you need to do this to determine policies and laws that affect your business, because if you don't engage, things will be dropped down on you that you may not want. So you need to be able to be in a position where you can have a say on what affects you and how it affects you and what should be done. And we've talked about the fact that, you know what, government does a lot of public engagement and public awareness. And so if you engage with government, then you are able to also put forward your agenda and ensure that it's part of the government's machinery for public education and influence. One thing that we didn't talk about is the fact that there's opportunities also for funding. So for those of you who have benefited from such funding opportunities, you know, like people typically don't even know that the private sector wing of the World Bank, IFC, for example, has funds that they lend to private sector businesses. And people here, they're actually shocked. You know, they don't know that some of our banks actually take some of this funding. And so that's why those funds, the use of those funds are restricted by certain guidelines, and you have to use it to lend to businesses in particular sectors. You know, how would you know if you are not part of that kind of ecosystem? You know, so there are so many schools. For those who don't know, there are so many schools that benefited from that fund. The Kyiamah International School, Morning Star, what's it called? Is it Morning Star College or whatever? They all got funding from IFC because there was a deliberate attempt to invest in the educational sector. And so when you engage with government, that's when you hear about some of these programs, you know, and you can access capacity building and also funding. And, you know, government also needs data, you know, like government decisions cannot just be taken in a vacuum, because maybe the president woke up today and maybe he ate something, maybe he had a bottle of water and there was a certain brand. I don't want to mention any brands because I don't want to be accused of being biased, you know, and he decided that, oh, this brand of water, maybe there was something wrong with it, so I'm going to ensure that there's a ban on bottled water or something. You know, I'm just using this as a random example.
Yeah.
And then that's it. No, he can't do that. Do you get it? And the only way government agencies can understand some of these things is by engaging with those businesses. So I remember that every year, for example, Ministry of Agric would write to me and tell me that I should confirm how much local maize we bought, how much local sorghum we bought, how much cassava we bought, you know. And you can't lie because, you know, you are reporting on your production volume. So your inputs must match with your outputs, you know. And so I used to always say, but this thing, they can actually work it out themselves, but hey, they're asking me. So then I would actually sit down and put it together and give them that information. So if you're not engaging with government, how will they get that data? I mean, they have research departments, but still, they will still come to you because you have that information. And so you are under obligation to provide it for them because ultimately it inures to your benefit. And also, when government has information, how will you be able to access it? You know, because I mean, like for example, I remember that when former President Mahama was in office, we had a meeting with him talking about local content and to thank him also for the support that his administration through Hanatete had provided our business and things like that. And so when we launched our cassava beer, we sent some samples to the office of the president for them to see that, yes, we were grateful, we got the excise break and we had produced the beer and, you know, and stuff like that. And you know what he said to us? At the time, I didn't even know that, I mean, maize growing was so commercial in nature that we had gluts in that year, we were exporting and we still had too much, you know, and he also didn't know that we were already using maize for beer. So Club, for example, is made from barley, maize, and then hops. And he was like, why don't you introduce a beer that uses maize? Because we have so much maize and we don't know what to do with it. We've sold as much as we can sell because apparently World Food Program takes maize from Ghana, you know, and I was like, wow, we produce that much maize in this country and we eat some and we have enough for commercial use and we export some. I was amazed, you know, but if you don't engage with government officials, how will you know that? So I'm like, hey, somebody should set up a factory producing cornflakes or something because here's the opportunity, you know. So in terms of you providing data, there's also opportunity also for you to benefit from data from government and then also from research findings that can benefit your business. And you can even develop new business opportunities from that. And then earlier on, I talked about intelligence. If you don't engage with the people, how do you know what they are plotting against you? How do you know what is coming ahead? You will always be surprised. So it's always important to engage and then you know. And there are all sorts of global multilateral agencies that are engaging with governments and telling them that do this, do that, do that. There's all sorts of influences that are external. They're not internal from Ghana. So if you don't have a foot in there, you don't have a seat at the table, you'll be sitting there and like, let me use the alcohol industry as an example. The WHO will come and tell government that they should close down all the beverage alcohol businesses because alcohol is bad for human consumption. It's increasing the numbers of people who are suffering from non-communicable diseases in Ghana, and people are dying from things like all sorts of things that are caused by drinking alcohol. So shut down all the alcohol factories, and then government will say, okay, the WHO says I should, so they have. I mean, that's an extreme example, but this is the sort of thing I'm talking about. And say that alcohol is bad, so increase the excise. And then you sit in there and then one day there's the Minister of Finance is reading the budget and he says, I've increased excise from 47.5% to 80%. I mean, people will stop buying beer. People will start making their own beer in their homes because they can't afford to buy it anymore, and that'll be the end of the business. So I think that's a summary on why government relations is important and why advocacy is important. And, I'm so happy that this has been a very interactive session. I've really enjoyed interacting with all of you. And let me see, people are still posting things. Somebody's got a business idea. Maize for Cerelac. I mean, oh, okay, somebody said India. Right, so thank you. Kobe, I'm done.
Excellent. Adjoba, that's so fantastic. I mean, more than this one. And I'm sure that we have taken, most of us, if not all of us, have actually had one or two ideas. I mean, I've got my theory that I'm going to research further on that. And I'm sure from the feedback, everybody has actually gotten something useful for that. I'm so grateful. Whenever I invite you, you don't disappoint us, but you come in. Excellent. As I said, I've worked with her, so I know how she works. You know, so when you know people and the way you always look up to that that benefit. Thank you. So maybe we would ask Linda if you want to vote or elect one of your colleagues or yourself, you give a Thanksgiving.
Linda, vote of thanks.
So, Adjoba, it's been very amazing to have you here. Of course, we had some expectation, but I think you have exceeded our expectation. Thank you very, very much, and on behalf of the entire MSc International Business 2020 class. We're very grateful. It's been a very insightful session, very empowering as well. And so I believe some of the keynotes we're going to take with us is definitely about the importance of networking and building strategic business relations with government and so on. We have quite a number of guys here who like to have beer a lot. So I won't mention their names. So at the right time, we'll probably invite you for dinner. I'm not going to mention the names. So thank you so much.
Felix.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, Linda. You've all been very good. I've enjoyed my session with all of you. And I'm looking forward to interacting with you further elsewhere. Some people have sent me LinkedIn invitations, and I will try and assist. But I'm not sometimes very good at responding on LinkedIn because I get so many requests. So please, if you sent me a connection request, please send me a note as well, so that I know that you're from this group, because I don't know everybody's name.
That's great, yeah.
And I'll pay particular attention to that. And so I hope that you would follow our work at the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce, and please follow our social media. And for those who are to join my chamber too, I'd be very happy to welcome you. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then to Dr. Kobi-Mensah, thank you very much for inviting her. We're grateful to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, bro.
So guys, stay back, and then as our guest lecturer exit, then we can plan for next week.
Read the messages before I go.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for your kind words. Thank you. I'm so glad. So, Samuel, I'll be expecting you.
Samuel.
Bye.
Samuel, link me and let's go.
Sure.
All right. Great.
Sammy.
All right.
No, it's like Charlie,
Sammy.
One exciting, should I say, very eye-opening session. You have heard a lot. Obviously, key is about your personality. You see the way you talk about networking. If you do not have yourself for that environment, then you have to start learning. From what I have personally, especially when I came from England, you go for meetings and you see people who came from the same company, the two of them. That's in another. I think we have
interference. We have an interference. I think Nana Kwesi.
It's from Nana Kwesi.
I think we have to be mindful of that. You don't go for events and then you only hang around with your colleague. You have to be open up. You have to speak to people. Know people, know what they do. You don't know. Maybe tomorrow you would need their services. I think this has been very, very insightful and eye-opening session. I'm sure we would actually apply that. Not only have heard, but we apply that in our various ways. All right, guys. So if you don't have any other questions, I think we're done for today.
Sir, I have a comment.
Yeah.
I have a comment. It relates to the point she made about getting involved, being able to know what laws are going to be passed even before they are passed, because they are going to impact your business and all. Yeah. This comment relates to particularly the new banking law, which is the Banks and Special Deposit Taking Institutions Act. And I think that it became clear that that law was so draconian in the sense that it gave so much powers to the central bank, the Bank of Ghana, as opposed to the previous law, when the enforcement, the regulatory enforcement began. Before then, the Bank of Ghana did not have such powers to be able to shut down banks just like that and then merge banks and what have you without going to court. But this new law, when it was passed and when it was eventually enforced, everybody was surprised that, hey, so Bank of Ghana all along has these powers. And I think it's because the banks themselves did not get involved in the passage of that law. Mm-hmm.
didn't get themselves involved in the passage of that law. I'll give you a contrary example. There is the Borrowers and Lenders Act, where under that law, if somebody owes a financial institution, all they have to do is they can easily go and then take possession of the collateral and then sell without even going to court. Now, that particular legislation had a lot of input from the banks because it was favorable to them.
Yeah.
That, hey, now we don't have to go and spend money and years in court just because we have to enforce a loan agreement. And that was passed in 2008. This Banks and Special Deposits Act was passed sometime in 2016 thereabouts. And here we are, it being enforced against them, and the banks have just been taken by complete surprise because they did not get involved as they should have in order to prevent giving so much powers to the central bank.
Excellent. That's an excellent contribution to what Adjoba just explained. And another lesson that I got from her presentation, regardless of the competition between you and your other suppliers in the market, you do not think that you are enemies. All right. Even when the companies are on each other's neck, you in that position, all right, in that position as a corporate affairs, or how do you strike a relationship with your counterpart so that even informally you will be able to strike a deal where it is necessary? You can have some sort of conversation moving forward to influence policy, because your CEOs would not be the one who are supposed to do it, and it will be your KPI, all right? So although the companies may not see eye to eye, how do you, who is in that particular position, forge ahead your relationship so that when you have to actually deliver on that mandate, you would be able to do that without any difficulty. And as she said, with her personality, she's able to strike relationship with people. So before it gets into the formal, she had already had an informal kind of arrangement already. I remember when I met her at the Association of Advertising Association Ghana. We were sitting down and somebody came to speak, and quickly she asked me my opinion. We started chatting, all right? And we were laughing throughout, chatting throughout, not knowing her. And at that time, I was even very new, I was even very fresh, in the country. But we had that relationship. And then when they needed that position, she called me that she's heard my name several times speaking to people. And so and it was easy working together. So you've got to, some people would always say, oh, I'm not that friendly type. That's my character, or that's my, personality. But I keep saying that when you're in corporate world, you have to have two personalities, what they call alter ego, all right? You've got to have two personalities. One which is your natural self, the other which is for corporate. Because you couldn't have perhaps your natural self, which is not the way corporate sees it, to be in corporate. It won't work, all right? But if you are the natural corporate character, then of course it works for you. But if you have the other characters that you think you're not that sociable, please, you have to start developing the other extra characteristics that would make you function very well within the corporate space, all right? So I think that's a good point. So as Nana Kwesi is actually highlighted, if, for example, the banking industry as a unit had actually access on the table, they could have perhaps influence this particular policy. But of course, it may be that their representatives are not so proactive, like Adjoba explained how they were proactive to form a unit in order to influence. So if you do not work as an industry or as a sector, you would be taken by surprise, and you would have the scenario that Nana Kwesi is actually explaining. All right, good point. Gideon, one last, then we can close. Gideon, your hand is up.
Yeah, okay, so Doc, good morning.
Yeah, morning.
All right, so in Adjoba's scenario, when she was giving the point, she mentioned two things that were very important to me, and those were that support groups are very important. So let's look at the scenario that Nana Kwesi just gave regards the banks. I'm sure you see some of the banks, even though will not be happy about the laws being made. They feel that well, it would go to the detriment of their competitors, and so they care less. Example with what is happening with MTN and then the other telcos, where government NCA is saying that MTN has a dominant is dominant, coming up with laws that would try to reduce their dominance. And you see, it's to the advantage. Don't really care about what's happening to MTN, and so I'm thinking that's what Ghanaians really, because it's something that has got nothing to do with them. They don't care, and so advocating for positive strikes in those businesses don't really matter to them. And so I think those are the problems we face in Ghana. I don't know. That's a bit of a
but Gideon, it seems to go contrary to this Ghanaian adage that or the proverb that when you see that
exactly,
your
I just wanted to
friend's
say that, but then my tree is no good.
beard is on fire. When you see that your friend's beard is on fire, please immerse yours into water.
Yeah, my tree is bad. I couldn't say it.
So I think we've learned a lot. And please, as I always say, don't let it be just learnings. See how you can apply it. So if you're in a position in your sector, you have to start forming relationship with your other competitors and start thinking about how those things could help you to influence policy and influence government agenda. I think that's a fantastic. And then of course, try and find out how do you amend your personality in order that it can actually make you function very, very well. We all know who we are, and we all know what are the things that perhaps could serve as a barrier. You know yourself better. If you think that you have to adjust something in your life, know that you have to do it in order that you can get results to be sustainable in your business and to also be employable. Because if you don't do that and you are ejected from one company, perhaps you will find it difficult to secure on another. Okay? Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much, Doc.
Yet another fantastic session.
Thank you so much, Doc.
Thank you, Doc. We're grateful.
Thank you, Doc. This is the final exam.
Definitely.
Final exam.
Enjoy your weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Adjoba.